You know, joining us tonight to talk about this and so much more is Mike Davis.
Thank you for having me.
Who are you? What do you do?
Well, I run the Article 3 Project, which is a conservative group that helped President Trump confirm his judges in his first term, and we have been the tip of the spear defending President Trump against this Biden lawfare and election interference for the last 2.5 years. We helped President Trump win that lawfare. He's back in the White House. We're going to continue to help him by helping him confirm his nominees to the executive branch, confirm his judicial nominees, and make sure that they have the political cover they need to do their jobs. We see on the right that we have really smart lawyers and they can follow the law, but we need two things in order for that to work. We need the law to be right, and we need the politics to be right. So we're helping President Trump get the smart lawyers to get the law right, and at the Article 3 Project, we're helping them get the politics right.
Right on. Should be fun. Thanks for hanging out. Libby's here.
I'm Libby Emmons. I'm here. Glad to be here. I'm with the Postmillennial and HumanEvents.com.
Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Labonte. I'm the lead singer of the heavy metal band All That Remains. I'm an anti-communist and a counter-revolutionary. Tim.
Well, that was easy. Let's go to the first story from the New York Post. FBI had 26 informants at January 6 Capitol riots. Most were involved. Bombshell DOJ report confirms. They say the FBI had at least 26 CIs on the ground. They call them CHSs, confidential human sources, in Washington, D.C. during J6, storming the Capitol, most of whom engaged in illegal activity during the chaos. The Justice Department's watchdog confirmed in the Bombshell report. Leadership at the Bureau had long been adamant that it did not have the sources who orchestrated the riot. That it did not have sources who orchestrated the riot. Questions about whether the FBI had informants involved in the riots were met with conspiracy theory labels by many mainstream media outlets. If you're asking if the violence at the Capitol was part of some operation orchestrated by the FBI, by FBI sources or agents, the answer is no. Outgoing FBI Director Christopher Wray told lawmakers back in July. Wray had long refused to divulge exactly how many informants were present that day. I'm going to go and assume it's probably more than just 26. But the DOJ's Office of the Inspector General found that of the FBI's confidential sources on the ground, 4 entered the Capitol in the midst of the riot and 13 went into a restricted area. Only 9 were not found to have engaged in illegal activity, according to the report. Critically, that report also shot down unsubstantiated speculation that the Bureau had agents stoking some of the mayhem that day. Quote, "We found no evidence in the materials we reviewed or in the testimony we received showing or suggesting that the FBI had undercover employees in the various protest crowds or at the Capitol." The report said only 3 of its 26 informants present had been instructed to observe potential domestic terror suspects on the day of the riot. The DOJ watchdog found the rest of the 23 appear to have gone to the Capitol of their own accord. I think this very much adds to the story that we had heard. This goes back to 2022 when AOC says Capitol Police were opening the doors for J6 rioters. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I was shocked because I am no conspiracy theorist. But when AOC proudly informed all of us that J6 was an inside job, I was shocked. Of course, I reviewed the evidence. And as it turns out, at least on some circumstances, the police were posing with some of these insurrectionists, they call them, taking photos and opening, at least what I can see, interior doors. Not only the interior doors, but was an instance where after doors had been opened, the police just stood next to the door and told the protesters, one guy says, "I don't agree with it, but I respect it." These cops were absolutely assisting. Not to mention, one man was acquitted entirely because he argued that a cop waved him in. Sure enough, there is video footage of a cop waving people in. That they try to claim, no, the cop meant something else. He was waving to other cops to come in. Sure, I think AOC is correct. Let me play this video for you. You can hear it right from her, adamantly expressing 2 years ago exactly what happened.
Like Antifa?
And that there were actual officers working with this, and we never got to the bottom of that, and we never got any answers about that. And then to this day, we're just supposed to pretend that that never happened.
What about Antifa?
I have no idea what happened to the people on the inside who were very clearly sympathetic with what was going on and opening the doors wide open for that. And I'm supposed to sit here and pretend like none of that ever happened. And then right afterwards, you have a massive, you just have this idea that throwing money at that problem is going to make it go away without any accountability. And so this is where these things are breaking down. We're not safe. And it's not just about members of Congress not being safe. The
Black
food
Lives
staff
Matter.
workers aren't safe. The
Black
janitors
Lives Matter.
aren't safe. Like, we need to get to the bottom of this.
You see what she was saying? She was calling for an investigation. She wants answers as to the federal law enforcement elements that were actively assisting J6. Well, I agree, AOC. It sounds like an inside job. And I'm going to stress this, too, in all seriousness, outside of any tongue-in-cheek joke or something like that. If one police officer, just one, helped the rioters in any way, and we know they did, that's an inside job. OK, what they're trying to do is when we say it was an inside job, they immediately jump to the claim that it means the government orchestrated the plot and made it all happen. No. Listen, if there is a bank, OK, this is what we said 2 years ago when we talked about this. If there's a bank and like 3 guys go to rob it and one security guard opens the door and puts a wedge in it and then walks away, we call that an inside job. Now, imagine if that happened and the police came in and said, looks like it was an inside job because this guy, who works here, opened the door for the robbers. And then immediately the media said, are you implying that the bank manager, along with all of its staff, coordinated with the police to steal the money? No, I didn't say that at all. I'm saying there was at least a certain or small element of internal security and law enforcement that assisted in this. It could be one person, but it's a fact. And now this just adds to it because FBI informants were actually rioting in the building. So what does this mean? What does this ultimately turn into? I mean, Trump's going to pardon these guys. He said what in the first 9 minutes?
I hope he does.
That's what he said. First 20 minutes.
Well, I mean, I hope he does. I don't see any reason to keep these people behind bars anymore.
No, I don't either. What is it, like some 1,500 people almost, something like that?
I don't have any. I honestly don't know. I know it's a lot, but I don't.
Large number.
Is
yeah.
it? I didn't know that it was over 1,000.
Oh, it's like substantially over 1,000. Yeah.
It's
Somewhere between it's somewhere between like 1,300 and 1,500.
Yeah, it's like 1,300.
Yeah.
Trump said in the first 20 minutes, it's like the first thing he's going to do, he's going to just pardon.
well, good. I mean, that should be the case. And the thing that really struck me is the way that the mainstream media or the legacy media or the Democrat-run media is framing this. They're saying that there were no FBI agents. There were no employees, and they're obfuscating the fact that confidential informants don't actually work for the FBI. But there were confidential informants. So there were people that were working with the FBI, but they weren't FBI agents and they weren't employees. And the fact that the media is running with that, and they're again obfuscating the fact that there were government assets in the crowd, and those people were egging other people on to do things. It's clearly dishonest, and it's frustrating because you've got this is going to be the narrative that the left is going to spin.
Let's take it up a notch, though. I got a question for you, Mike. We had the journalist Stephen Baker, I believe. I'm not getting his name wrong, am I? He was the one who was criminally charged.
Yeah, he sure was at the Blaze.
Yeah, he said he thinks this is actually a plot from the Pentagon, that they wanted the J6ers to riot, that they were hoping for some violence that they could ultimately use, and that if you look at the actions taken by the federal government since then, it only really makes sense if there actually was extreme violence. All we really got was basically trespass and some vandalism. And if you can even call it trespass on a lot of these cases, the people who broke the windows, that I get. You fight cops, you hit cops, you go to jail, that I get. But there was he and another guy I talked to said that one of the cops working at the Capitol Police evacuated the members of Congress. Had he not done that, they could have gotten hurt, might have been likely, and that he got in trouble for having done that because he was not given orders to evacuate. So it's his opinion that they wanted this to happen. They intentionally didn't bring police or National Guard because they needed an excuse to go after Trump. But I'm curious what you think.
I mean, I would say this: January 6th was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. And I think what the Biden Justice Department tried to do with January 6th, along with the January 6th committee, is they tried to use this as an excuse to cancel Trump and cancel Trump's movement, right? They wanted Trump and his ideas, his America First movement, to go away. And so what should have happened is they should have looked at January 6th and said, wait, people who are there legally, people who are outside have, even if you think they're wrong, even if you think they're crazy, they have an absolute First Amendment rights to protest their government and protest the election. And then there's a second category of people who trespassed, and there's a dispute whether some people even trespassed if the cops are letting them into the damn building. But let's just presume that they trespass. Okay, then you charge them with trespass. And then there's a third category of people who were violent, and you charge them with violence. But I was a staffer on the Senate Judiciary Committee during the Kavanaugh proceedings when you had protesters threatening violence throughout the Capitol, trespassing into offices, trespassing into restricted zones. Not a damn thing happened to them, right? You look at the BLM and Antifa rioters, the much more deadly and destructive BLM and Antifa rioters. They caused billions in damage. They killed dozens. They essentially get amnesty. So what they did on January 6th is they wanted to lump everyone together, call them insurrectionists, even though no one was charged with insurrection. How many insurrectionists go into a nation's capital unarmed, get to the Senate floor of the nation's capital, walk through velvet ropes, follow police direction, and don't burn down the damn place?
Got an escort.
Yes.
To the Senate chambers.
Yes, they did.
When the Q shaman, of course, was seen on surveillance footage walking around, politely asking police, and police directed him. That's an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and why? So
shaman wasn't working alone. The police let him in.
And if everyone else is getting charged for January 6th and they're hunting people down for years and 1,500 people are charged, why weren't these 23 paid FBI contractors? Well, weren't there 23 who were paid, but they just showed up that day, and 3 who were who were working that day, right? There were
3 who the FBI said, why don't you come out? And then there were 23 who showed up at their own volition, who had not allegedly been requested by the FBI.
That means they were just participants.
Yeah.
So why weren't those 23 who were supposedly off duty that day? Why weren't they charged like the rest of the January 6th
11
people?
of those 23 went on to the restricted area outside the Capitol, and of the 3 who were asked to be there, 1 of them went inside the Capitol.
And they weren't charged.
Yeah.
Right. So why weren't they charged if they're off duty? Why weren't they charged?
And another 2 of the 23 went into the Capitol, because it was 3 went in altogether.
So maybe they were on duty, and that's why they weren't charged.
Yeah, it is confusing as to why they weren't charged. How did their names never come up? And then they talk about how the report was saying, people just on the grounds weren't going to be charged.
Well, they're doing that now.
We know that they've been charging them. There's like tons and tons. If you look at the Capitol breach cases and do a search on the DOJ website for trespass, it's like hundreds of entries of people who are charged with trespass.
Yeah, I mean, think about this. They're trying to say that these January 6th protesters tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power on another branch of government. Well, what the hell do they think they did during the Kavanaugh proceedings? They disrupted the proceedings, going 8 seconds into the proceedings. You have Kamala Harris and the paid protesters in the gallery disrupting the proceedings the entire time. They chased senators and threatened them. They threatened them outside of their homes. They tried to obstruct the vote on the Senate floor. I was there for all this. Nothing happens.
You even had Amy Schumer trying to occupy the Supreme Court at one point.
I mean, this is all true, and all this stuff that all of the people outside of the Supreme Court justices' homes and the person that was threatening Kavanaugh and all of these things are just swept under.
You mean Chuck Schumer when he went to the Supreme Court and physically threatened Kavanaugh?
Yes,
and Gorsuch, my former boss.
He did. He by name. Yes, absolutely. It's ridiculous that the left is allowed to make these assertions that are so blatantly false, while at the same time the left is incredibly totally guilty of the exact same kind of things that they would lose their mind over.
Let's jump to this story from the AP. They've got a better framing of this. So, of course, in the previous segment, we're talking about how, there were 26 confidential human sources on the ground, 3 of whom were paid. And we know that from AOC and many others, there were police officers who were assisting. There's video footage of the shaman being led to the chambers by Capitol Police. Well, after this IG report comes out exposing that there were 26 informants involved, with the majority of them participating in January 6th, here's how the corporate press frames it. Let's start with the AP. Watchdog finds FBI intelligence missteps before J6 riot, but no undercover agents were present. Well, that's a really weird way to frame a story that shocked us all by learning that 26 informants were there. How about this from Axios? There were no undercover FBI employees at the U.S. Capitol or rally at the Ellipse on January 6, 2021, according to a new Watchdog report that further debunked conspiracy theories that law enforcement instigated the deadly riot. Let's try USA Today. No FBI informants were authorized to enter Capitol on January 6, 2021, DOJ report. How come none of the headlines were FBI informants illegally entered restricted grounds and the building participating in the J6 riots? Because the media is lying to you and colludes with these intelligence elements. This is why MSNBC and CNN love to hire retired intel guys.
Yeah.
It's because one big incestuous family tree.
Well, you missed our headline. Our headline did say that at the Post-Millennial did say that FBI sources went into the Capitol.
Well, of course. That's why I'm not bringing you up. And the New
'cause
York Post
we were
did
honest
too.
about it, yeah.
People being honest, the lead here is that we've long wanted to know how many informants were involved. And now we have a general. I think it was more than 26, to be honest.
Well, that's just
FBI.
Yeah. that's
Right,
just
exactly.
FBI, and they said also that they didn't have a larger presence because it was a low security thing for them. It was like not high priority. So otherwise they would have had more.
I suppose.
Yeah.
So let's get this straight. 26 paid contractors from the FBI. 3 of them were on duty that day, and 0 of them get arrested for January 6th.
Is it 0 got arrested?
0.
Even though it's like, I'm just looking at the, I love the DOJ website where you can look at all of the Capitol breach cases. There's 128 pages of names of people who were sentenced. That's just sentenced. Not even arrested.
That's
wow.
It's it's such a travesty of justice, and the idea that this was not at least instigated by the government itself is just ridiculous.
Yeah, but now we are watching, and we know this about the media, but these headlines are brazen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the story was shocking when we learned how many informants were paid. Informants, how many showed up? AP. No undercover agents present. This is the dirty game they play with fact checking that I tell you guys about all the time. So I don't know if you've heard me tell the story, but basically, or the circumstance, basically, Snopes, for instance, what do? Donald Trump will do a backflip, land perfectly on the ground in a perfect pose, and everyone claps. And then the story goes viral. Donald Trump does backflip. And then Snopes write a headline. Did Donald Trump land a perfect, flawless backflip in front of a crowd of supporters who all clapped and cheered on Sunday? False. Mm-hmm. And then it'll go through this big, long tirade about how Donald Trump did not actually do this. The claims were made on the internet, blah, blah, blah. Then at the very last sentence, it will say, while Donald Trump did perform a flawless backflip in front of his supporters who clapped and cheered on Saturday, he did not do it on Sunday. They'll add that no one asked and then debunk themselves. AP, no agents were present. Okay, tell us about the 26 paid informants who were in the building and never got arrested. Yeah.
I mean, it's frustrating because this is something that we've seen for, the better part of a decade now. The way that, I mean, honestly, Donald Trump is kind of the guy that really made this something that people were aware of. The people that were conservatives had kind of felt like the mainstream media was unfair to them. It became more clear with the FBI or the IRS targeting Lois Lerner and targeting conservatives in like 2013 or whatever it was. But with the election of Barack Obama, you started to see that it wasn't just that the media seemed a little biased, and it was likely because they were from cities, which is generally what your average person was like, well, maybe they're a little biased, but they are from cities, and so they probably have a different perspective than people on the on the right. And that was trying to steel man the arguments, trying to think charitably. But then once you saw the way that the media behaved once Barack Obama became the president, and with the IRS scandal, and then 2016 when it became clear that the Democrats didn't have the forever control over the government, which they genuinely thought. They thought that now, once Barack Obama was elected, they thought that it was obviously going to be Hillary Clinton, and there was going to be essentially the Republicans would be a regional party. The Republicans would stand up someone against the Democrats every time, but the real the real debate was going to be which Democrat was going to run to beat the Republicans. That was the sense on the from the people on the left. And once they saw that once Donald Trump won and they saw that that was not the case, they completely flipped out and they went mask off with the lying, the authoritarianism, the attempts to narrative build and control what people saw and heard. And it's tiring, but we've been seeing it again, 10, 15 years now.
I'll start caring about the January 6th riot when Democrats start caring about the much more deadly and destructive BLM.
May 29. We call it M29.
Yeah, that's a big
M29
day.
insurrection.
When they set fire to the church in Washington.
And firebombed the White House and forced the president
White House
into an emergency bunker.
And the Secret Service guard station, and they attacked the federal courthouse in Portland for months.
For over 100 straight nights.
It was a national tragedy.
Billions of dollars in insurance damage by estimates.
Maybe we should ask the incoming administration to launch the M29 committee.
I know that everyone's really jazzed about doing stuff like that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, I would love to just be like, you know what, screw all that. We're just going to go make everything awesome. We're not going to dwell on our...
But that means arresting the criminal elements who have been corrupting government.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I don't what waste of time was the January 6th committee? I don't want to see a January 6th committee. Do you know what I mean?
I disagree completely.
Yeah, we have to.
I disagree completely
I just want all the good stuff.
But think about what you're saying. We are a nation, a body politic, and on our left arm, it has become gangrene.
Sure. And
the way I see it is you're saying, well, look, I get that we have an infection on our arm that's rotting away the body, but let's just focus on learning how to juggle with the right hand. It's like, no, triage. We've got to stop the rot.
But isn't it every 4 years? Aren't we going to just see every 4 years the new administration prosecuting the previous administration?
No. I'll tell you why.
Ad nauseum.
Let me tell you why. The reason they did the last 4 years of Biden's persecution of Trump, his top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, his January 6th supporters who were persecuted, parents, Christian. The reason
that stuff.
The reason the Biden regime did this, along with their Democrat allies in New York, Atlanta, other hellholes around the country, is because we let them get away with this the first time. I think we need to give them a healthy dose of their own medicine. I call it the dead chicken strategy. Give them a healthy dose of their own medicine. Show them power for their real crimes instead of our side's non-crimes. And so they never do this again.
You don't think there's a way to do that without just wasting a bunch of government time and money?
I mean, the government wastes a bunch of time and money every day.
It's infuriating. I hate it so much. I hate that.
I think that we need, I really do hope that Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel, I hope they open a criminal probe under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, conspiracy against rights.
Yes.
Down in the Southern District of Florida, Fort Pierce, Florida.
Who do you want to see them prosecute?
I would like them to investigate, and if appropriate, I'm an attorney. I still have bar duties.
Said.
If appropriate, they should prosecute anyone who politicized and weaponized our intel agencies and law enforcement to go after political enemies for non-crimes.
So you think they should investigate Merrick Garland for going after parents at school board meetings?
You're damn right. Let's go through the list. I may have a list in my...
Or what about the people who determined that Catholics who go to Latin Mass are actually akin to domestic extremists?
Yeah, down in Richmond.
Yeah, investigate whoever came up with that memo.
I would look at, for example, President Joe Biden's role. Even if he has presidential immunity, he could be an important fact witness. I would look at his White House counsel's office, like Jonathan Sue, who waived President Trump's claim of constitutional executive privilege going back 250 years to George Washington, which led to the Mar-a-Lago raid and the 2 indictments by Jack Smith and his counselor Jay Pratt. I'd go after...
Did you investigate Smith?
And real quick...
Definitely.
When Trump said in that Meet the Press interview, this man came to my home...
Yep.
Oh, I hope he does not forget, and he brings about accountability and justice.
Well, the good thing is that President Trump is not going to have to worry about any of this, because if his Justice Department does its job, they're going to obviously open a criminal probe on under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, just like Jack Smith did. That was one of his charges
an investigation of Robert Hur, for not releasing that transcript, the unredacted transcript?
Nobody's above the law. There is a long list of people, and I would say Fannie Willis, Nathan Wade, Tish James,
Benny Thompson.
Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson too.
I do know I screw that up every time.
Benny, no.
Sorry, Benny. No, Benny Thompson.
I would, hey, look, nobody's above the law. And when a grand jury.
Yeah, Benny, you're not above the law.
Sorry.
That's right. And when a federal grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida brings an indictment, obviously they're legitimate. A grand jury brought them. And if they're innocent, then, the
What about Mayorkas? Do you want to see a prosecution of Mayorkas?
For his illegal mass parole of 15 million illegal immigrants into our country, and the resulting migrant crime, the rapes, murders, robberies.
I've got, just a handful of people I'd like to see investigated too, like Gretchen Whitmer and
what would you investigate Whitmer for?
The deaths of the elderly during COVID.
Would you throw Cuomo in there, Andrew Cuomo?
Absolutely, and Wolf and Newsom and who am I forgetting?
There was a memo that came out from the CDC.
New Jersey.
Yeah, that governor, the governor.
His name.
He's just. Well, we can still go after.
They all did the same thing. They put COVID patients in nursing homes. Murphy, and we saw the reports. I believe, right there, I would say probable cause to open an investigation. Present a preponderance of evidence to a grand jury and say, should we indict on the evidence we have? And if they say yes, then we'll build our case. According to the reports that came out, and some of it may be political, I don't know, Cuomo killed 15,000 elderly people by choosing to put sick people in nursing homes instead of using, the Comfort that was brought to New York that Trump.
The USS Comfort.
He could have used the ship.
There was a memo that came out from the CDC in the spring of 2020 that instructed nursing homes to, once people went to the hospital to be treated, when they were done being treated, the nursing homes were instructed by the CDC to take them back. So that was the order that all of those governors were following. It was directly from the CDC.
Those governors wanted to save their Medicaid money.
I agree with you that it was wrong, but there was a memo.
I think. Do you think that they lost much sleep?
And they can be investigated, and we can look at their communications, because for all we know, there's an email from Cuomo to a health official in New York who says, "I understand there's a memo, but this could result in mass death of the elderly if we do this." And Cuomo might have said, "Yeah, it's fine, do it." They said to do it.
Well,
and
yeah,
okay.
Latipo in Florida didn't do it. He didn't authorize stuff like that.
Yep, he did a good job. So, I think there should be a lot of investigations and charges. I do not see how if we do not get a handle on the corruption, then when Trump gets out, the apocalypse starts all over again.
100%.
And it's going to be worse than anything we have seen, because you're going to and look, we may have won this battle in the culture war. I've been saying this for some time now. The podcast presidency, they called it. Shows like this have played a role in communicating a vision and a message and ideas and factual information to regular people that allowed them to make an informed decision. But if we're going to sit here and just laugh at Rachel Maddow having a ratings spiral, 6 months to a year, Comcast, Disney, Fox isn't as bad. I'll give them a little bit more credit. I would say they're net positive, but they're not perfect. But these big corporations, they're going to dump billions into the space and make sure we are drowned out. They're going to make sure they dominate the front pages. They're going to cut deals with the corporate class at YouTube and other big tech platforms. They're going to lobby for certain censorship policies. They're going to lobby for things like speech liability insurance. And they're going to come out and be like, well, we have our errors and omissions insurance too. YouTube should require, oh yeah. And then they're going to basically lobby for things that make it for small independent creators. It's going to make it impossible. Then when 2028 comes around, there will not be the authentic independent podcaster anymore. Then they come back in, and if these criminal elements are allowed to persist with Pam Bondi, Cash, and Trump just sitting by and letting it happen, they're going to come back and say, now we have to excise the populist movement. It's our last chance.
100%. And look, I always say that Today's Democrats, they're not our parents' or grandparents' Democrat Party. They're not liberals who love America.
Absolutely.
They are leftists. They are Marxists. They do not believe in free speech. They believe in censorship, and they do it under the guise of combating misinformation or disinformation, inconvenient
or to reduce harm or
yes,
something like that.
inconvenient facts that end up being true. They don't believe in equality. They believe in equity, and they don't believe in equal justice and due process. They believe in a politicized and weaponized justice system.
Yep, absolutely.
If we do not stop them this time for their real crimes, I 100% agree with you, Tim. They're going to come back and crush us after January 20th, 2029.